The morning sun cut through the tall windows of the Atlanta Police Department headquarters, casting long rectangles of golden light across the polished floors. The building hummed with its usual rhythm, phones ringing in distant offices, the clatter of keyboards, the murmur of conversations that blended into a constant low drone. It was 8:47 on a Tuesday, and Lieutenant Sarah Collins walked through the main corridor with purpose, her boots striking the floor in steady beats. Beside her, moving with the fluid grace of a shadow-given form, was Max, her 7-year-old Belgian Malinois. His black harness caught the light as he padded alongside her, ears relaxed but alert, dark eyes scanning the environment with the quiet intelligence that had made him a legend in the K-9 unit. Sarah had been called in for what dispatch described as a routine verification. The evidence locker on the 3rd floor needed a K-9 sweep, standard protocol after a weekend when the security system had reported a brief glitch. Probably nothing, almost certainly nothing. But protocol existed for a reason, and Sarah Collins was not someone who cut corners. She nodded to Officer Dennings at the front desk, a young man with eager eyes who always seemed to straighten his posture whenever she passed. Max ignored him entirely, focused on the path ahead. They reached the elevator and Sarah pressed the button for the 3rd floor. The door slid closed with a soft hiss, and for a moment it was just the two of them in the humming metal box, ascending through the building. Sarah glanced down at Max. He sat perfectly still, his breathing calm and measured. She had worked with him for 5 years now, and in that time she had learned to read him the way some people read books. Every twitch of his ear, every shift in his weight, every subtle change in his posture told her something. Right now he was calm, professional, ready for work but not anticipating trouble. The elevator opened onto the 3rd floor, and the atmosphere shifted immediately. The corridor here was quieter, more sterile. Fluorescent lights replaced the natural glow from the windows below, casting everything in a flat, shadowless white. The evidence locker was at the end of the hall, behind a reinforced door with a keypad and a biometric scanner. Sarah approached it, swiped her badge, and placed her thumb on the scanner. A soft beep, a click, and the door swung open. The room beyond was vast, filled with metal shelving units that stretched from floor to ceiling. Each shelf held carefully labeled boxes, bags, and containers, the physical remnants of countless cases, some closed, some still open, some forgotten by everyone except the meticulous filing system that kept track of them all. The air smelled faintly of plastic and dust, with an underlying chemical note from the preservation materials used on certain items. Sergeant Howard was waiting inside, a clipboard in his hand and a tired expression on his face. He was a heavy-set man in his 50s, with thinning gray hair and the kind of deep-set eyes that had seen too much paperwork and not enough sunlight. "Morning, Lieutenant," he said, his voice carrying the rasp of someone who had been talking all morning. "Thanks for coming up. Probably nothing, but you know how it is." Sarah nodded. "Better safe than sorry. What happened with the system?" Howard shrugged. "Brief outage Saturday night, lasted maybe 40 seconds. Tech says it was a power fluctuation, nothing malicious. But regulations say we need a sweep after any security interruption, so here we are." Sarah unclipped Max's lead, giving him the signal to begin his work. The dog moved forward immediately, his nose dropping to the ground as he began his methodical sweep of the room. He worked in a pattern she had trained him in years ago, systematic, thorough, missing nothing. His paws made soft sounds on the concrete floor as he moved between the shelving units, his body low and focused. Sarah watched him work, her arms crossed over her chest. Howard stood nearby, making occasional notes on his clipboard, clearly eager to get this over with and move on to his next task. The minutes stretched out in comfortable silence, broken only by the soft sounds of Max's movement and the distant hum of the building's ventilation system. Max had cleared 3 rows of shelving when something changed. Sarah saw it before she consciously registered what she was seeing. Max's body went rigid, his muscles locking into place as if someone had flipped a switch. His ears, which had been moving freely as he worked, suddenly snapped forward and stayed there. His nose, which had been sweeping back and forth across the ground, now pointed directly at a specific spot on the shelf in front of him. He did not move. He did not make a sound. He simply froze. Every fiber of his being focused on that single point. Sarah's heart rate increased, but her voice remained calm. "Max, what do you have?" The dog did not respond to her voice. He remained locked in position, his dark eyes fixed on a sealed evidence bag on the second shelf from the bottom. The bag was clear plastic, and through it Sarah could see what appeared to be a jumble of items. Papers, maybe, or fabric. A white label on the front read Bag 12 in black marker, followed by a case number she did not recognize. Howard looked up from his clipboard, his expression shifting from boredom to concern. "What's he doing?" "He's alerting," Sarah said, moving closer. "Something in that bag." Howard frowned. "Bag 12? Let me check." He flipped through the pages on his clipboard, running his finger down columns of numbers and codes. "Here it is. Bag 12, case number 2024-7834. Jewelry store robbery. Closed last March. Suspect confessed. Got 18 months. Items were never recovered, but this bag contains materials collected from the scene." He looked up, his frown deepening. "Should be nothing in there but paper evidence and some fabric samples." Sarah crouched down next to Max, her eyes on the bag. Max's alerts were never wrong. In 5 years, he had never given her a false positive. Whatever was in that bag, it was something he was trained to detect, and Max was trained to detect drugs. "I need to open this bag," Sarah said. Howard hesitated. "That's a closed case, Lieutenant. Chain of custody protocols. I can't just let you." Sarah stood, beating his eyes. "Sergeant, my dog is alerting on this evidence. That means something is in there that shouldn't be. I need to document this and investigate. You can note my request in your log, but I need access to this bag." Howard held her gaze for a moment, then sighed. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a set of keys. "Let me get you the proper forms. Everything by the book." Sarah nodded. Everything by the book. 20 minutes later, with all the appropriate paperwork signed and witnessed, Sarah carefully opened Bag 12. She wore gloves, and Howard stood beside her with a camera, documenting every step. Max had been moved to the side of the room, where he sat watching with intense focus, his job done but his attention unwavering. Inside the bag, Sarah found exactly what the manifest said she would find. Photocopies of insurance documents, a torn piece of fabric that might have come from a jacket, a few photographs of the crime scene. Nothing remarkable. Nothing that should have triggered Max's alert. But beneath the papers, tucked into the corner of the bag as if someone had tried to hide it, was a smaller plastic pouch. It was sealed with tape, and through the clear material, Sarah could see a fine white powder. Howard's face went pale. "That's not on the manifest." "No," Sarah said quietly. "It's not." She sealed the bag again, her mind racing. Someone had planted drugs in closed evidence, or someone had hidden drugs in evidence to smuggle them through the building, or someone had made a mistake. Except mistakes like this did not happen by accident. The evidence locker was one of the most secure areas in the building. Access was restricted, logged, monitored. For something to end up in a sealed bag without being documented, someone with access had to have put it there deliberately. "I need to see the access logs for this section," Sarah said. "And I need to know everyone who has touched this bag since it was sealed." Howard nodded, his earlier reluctance replaced by a grim understanding of what they might be dealing with. "I'll pull the records. But, Lieutenant," he lowered his voice, "if this is what it looks like, we need to be careful who we talk to." Sarah met his eyes. "I know." She looked down at Max, who had risen to his feet and was watching her with those intelligent dark eyes. He had done his job perfectly, as he always did. He had no idea that his simple alert had just cracked open something that might run deeper than either of them could imagine. "Good boy," she murmured, reaching down to scratch behind his ears. "Good boy." Max's tail wagged once, a brief acknowledgement, and then he was still again, waiting for whatever came next. The access logs for Bag 12 painted a troubling picture. According to the records, the bag had been checked into evidence on March 15th by Detective Marcus Webb, the lead investigator on the jewelry store case. It had been accessed twice after that, once by Webb himself on March 22nd, and once by an evidence clerk named Thomas Huang on April 3rd. After that, nothing. The bag had sat untouched on its shelf for months, gathering dust, presumably forgotten along with the closed case it belonged to. Sarah sat in her small office on the second floor, the printouts spread across her desk, Max lying at her feet. The afternoon sun had shifted, and now the light came through her window at a lower angle, casting long shadows across the room. She had spent the last 3 hours making quiet inquiries, pulling records, trying to build a picture of what had happened without alerting anyone to what she was looking for. Detective Marcus Webb had been with the department for 12 years. His record was clean. Commendations, successful cases, a reputation for being thorough if not particularly imaginative. He was currently on administrative leave, recovering from a knee surgery. Sarah had met him a few times at department functions, but she did not know him well. Thomas Huang had been an evidence clerk for 8 years. His access to Bag 12 on April 3rd was logged as a routine inventory check, part of a quarterly audit. His record was also clean, but someone had put drugs in that bag, and the security system had glitched on Saturday night, a 40-second window when the cameras and sensors might have been offline, long enough for someone to enter the locker, add something to a bag, and leave without being recorded. Sarah leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples. The obvious conclusion was that someone inside the department was dirty, someone with access to the evidence locker, knowledge of the security systems, and a reason to hide drugs in closed evidence. But she could not make accusations without proof. She could not even voice her suspicions without potentially alerting the very person she was looking for. Her phone buzzed. A text from Captain Rodriguez, her direct superior. "Heard you found something in the evidence sweep. Come to my office when you have a chance." Sarah stared at the message for a long moment. Rodriguez was a good captain, fair, experienced, respected. She had no reason to distrust him, but right now she was not sure she could trust anyone. She typed a quick response. "On my way." Max lifted his head as she stood, reading her body language instantly. She grabbed his lead from the hook by the door, and he rose to his feet, ready to accompany her. She had not planned to bring him to Rodriguez's office, but something made her want him close. His presence was reassuring, a constant in a situation that was rapidly becoming uncertain. Captain Rodriguez's office was on the 4th floor, in the administrative wing where the carpet was softer, and the walls were decorated with framed commendations and photographs. Sarah knocked on the open door, and Rodriguez looked up from his computer screen. "Collins, come in." He gestured to the chair across from his desk, his expression neutral. "I see you brought Max. Hope that's not a problem." "Sir?" Rodriguez shrugged. "He's welcome. Shut the door, please." Sarah complied, then took the offered seat. Max settled beside her, his eyes moving around the room with quiet alertness. Rodriguez was a compact man in his late 40s, with silver at his temples and the kind of calm demeanor that came from decades of handling crises. He folded his hands on his desk and regarded Sarah with an unreadable expression. "Howard filed a report about what you found this morning. Undocumented substance in a sealed evidence bag." He paused. "That's a serious discovery." "Yes, sir. Have you had the substance tested yet?" Sarah shook her head. "I wanted to maintain chain of custody. The bag is secured in a separate locker with my personal seal. I was planning to submit it to the lab this afternoon." Rodriguez nodded slowly. "Good. That's the right call." He was silent for a moment, his eyes never leaving her face. "Collins, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I need a direct answer. Do you have any theories about how that substance ended up in that bag?" Sarah considered her words carefully. The bag was sealed by Detective Webb last March. It was accessed once by Webb and once by an evidence clerk. The security system had a 40-second outage on Saturday night. Beyond that, I don't have enough information to form a theory. But you have suspicions. Sarah met his eyes. "I think someone inside this department put drugs in that bag, sir. Whether it was recent or months ago, I don't know. But it didn't get there by accident." Rodriguez held her gaze for a long moment. Then he sighed, leaning back in his chair. I was afraid you'd say that. He rubbed his jaw, a gesture Sarah had seen him make when he was wrestling with a difficult decision. Collins, what I'm about to tell you stays in this room, understood? Yes, sir. 6 months ago, Internal Affairs opened a quiet investigation into irregularities in the evidence locker. Discrepancies in the logs, items that didn't match their manifests, that sort of thing. Small stuff, easy to explain away individually. But the pattern was concerning. He paused. The investigation is ongoing, very few people know about it. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine, and now I've stumbled into the middle of it. Looks that way. Rodriguez leaned forward. I'm going to loop you in, Collins. You've already got your hands dirty, and frankly, I could use someone with your instincts on this. But I need to know you can handle it. This investigation might lead to people you know, people you've worked with. Can you follow the evidence no matter where it goes? Sarah thought about her colleagues, the men and women she saw every day, the ones she trusted to have her back in dangerous situations. The thought that one of them, or more than one, might be corrupt was deeply unsettling. But she had taken an oath, and that oath meant something. Yes, sir, she said, I can handle it. Rodriguez nodded. Good. He pulled a folder from his desk drawer and slid it across to her. This is what IA has so far. Read it, memorize it, then give it back to me. Nothing leaves this room in writing. He stood, moving to the window, his back to her. And Collins, watch your back. If someone in this building is dirty, they're going to notice you poking around. They might decide to do something about it. Sarah took the folder, feeling its weight in her hands. I understand, sir. She glanced down at Max, who was watching her with those steady, intelligent eyes. Whatever was coming, at least she would not be facing it alone. The folder contained 6 months of careful documentation, incident reports, access logs, interview summaries, timeline reconstructions. Sarah read through it that evening in her apartment. Max curled up on his bed in the corner, while she sat at her kitchen table with a cup of cold coffee and a growing sense of unease. The pattern was subtle but undeniable. Over the past 2 years, there had been 17 cases where evidence had been mishandled in ways that benefited criminal defendants. Missing items, contaminated samples, broken chains of custody that led to cases being thrown out. Each incident, taken alone, could be explained as human error or bad luck. But taken together, they painted a picture of systematic sabotage. And at the center of it all, appearing again and again in the access logs and case files, were 3 names: Detective Marcus Webb, Evidence Clerk Thomas Huang, and Lieutenant David Chen. Sarah knew David Chen. They had worked together on a major gang case 2 years ago. He was sharp, ambitious, well-connected. He had a reputation for getting results, though some of his methods had always struck Sarah as a little too aggressive for her taste. She had never liked him much, but she had never suspected him of anything like this. She turned to the section on Webb. The detective was a solid investigator, but his finances showed some troubling patterns: unexplained deposits, expensive purchases that did not match his salary. Nothing definitive, but enough to raise flags. Huang was the most puzzling. His record was spotless, his finances clean, his behavior unremarkable. But his access to the evidence locker made him a key figure in any scheme to manipulate evidence. Either he was involved, or someone was using his credentials without his knowledge. Sarah closed the folder and sat in silence, listening to the sounds of the city outside her window. Traffic, distant sirens, the murmur of voices from the apartment below. Atlanta at night, never truly quiet, always alive with movement and purpose. Max lifted his head, sensing her mood. He rose from his bed and padded over to her, resting his chin on her knee. She reached down and stroked his fur, taking comfort in the simple warmth of his presence. "We've got work to do, buddy," she murmured, "and I don't think it's going to be easy." Max's tail wagged once, as if to say he was ready for whatever came next. The next morning, Sarah began her investigation in earnest. She had to be careful. If Chen or Webb got wind of what she was doing, they might cover their tracks or worse, come after her directly. So she moved slowly, methodically, gathering information without drawing attention. She started with Huang. As the evidence clerk, he was the least likely to have the connections or motive for a large-scale corruption scheme. If he was involved, he was probably a pawn, not a player. And if he was not involved, he might be a valuable ally. She found him in the evidence locker, restocking shelves with newly processed items. He was a slight man in his 30s, with neat black hair and wire-rimmed glasses that gave him a scholarly appearance. He looked up as she entered, surprise flickering across his face. "Lieutenant Collins, can I help you?" Sarah had brought Max with her, as always. The dog moved to her side, his presence calm and professional. She smiled, keeping her tone casual. "Just following up on that bag we found yesterday. Bag 12. I wanted to ask you a few questions about the inventory process." Huang's expression shifted to concern. "Of course. I already gave my statement to Sergeant Howard, but I'm happy to help." He set down the box he was carrying. "That was a strange find. I've been going over my records trying to figure out how something like that could have slipped through. You accessed that bag on April 3rd, Sarah said. Do you remember anything unusual about it?" Huang frowned, pushing his glasses up his nose. "April 3rd was the quarterly audit. I checked about 60 bags that day, just verifying seals and locations against the manifest." He shook his head. "I don't remember anything specific about bag 12. It was sealed, it was in the right place, it matched the manifest. That's all I would have checked." "You didn't open it?" "No. For a closed case, I'd only open the bag if there was a visible problem with the seal or the contents. Everything looked normal." Sarah nodded, watching his face carefully. Huang seemed genuine, his confusion apparently real. Either he was an excellent liar, or he truly had no idea what was in that bag. "One more question," she said. "Have you noticed anything unusual in the evidence locker lately? Missing items, moved items, anyone accessing areas they shouldn't be?" Huang hesitated. Sarah caught the flicker of something in his eyes. Not guilt, but worry. He glanced around the empty room, then lowered his voice. "There have been some things," he said slowly. "Little things. Items not quite where I left them. Logs that don't match my memory. I thought I was just being paranoid, or that I was making mistakes without realizing it." He met her eyes. "But you're asking, which means you've noticed something too." Sarah felt a spark of hope. Huang was observant, and he was troubled. That made him a potential ally. "I need someone I can trust in this room," she said quietly. "Someone who can tell me if anything changes, anything at all. Can you do that?" Huang studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "I can do that. But Lieutenant, be careful. I don't know what's going on, but I have a feeling it's bigger than either of us realizes." Sarah reached out and shook his hand. "I'll be in touch." As she left the evidence locker with Max at her side, she felt the weight of the investigation pressing down on her. She had one potential ally, but she also had 3 suspects, a mountain of circumstantial evidence, and no idea who else might be involved. The sun was climbing higher, burning off the morning coolness and filling the streets with the heat of a Georgia summer. Sarah walked Max through the parking lot, letting him stretch his legs before they headed to their next stop. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Stop digging. Last warning." Sarah stared at the screen, her jaw tightening. Then she deleted the message and kept walking. The warning only confirmed what she already suspected. She was getting close to something, and someone was scared. Good, she thought. Let them be scared. Over the next week, Sarah conducted her investigation with the patience and precision of a surgeon. She pulled financial records, cross-referenced schedules, interviewed witnesses under the guise of routine follow-ups. She never mentioned internal affairs, never hinted at the larger investigation. As far as anyone knew, she was just being thorough about the strange discovery in Bag 12. Max was her constant companion, his presence both comforting and practical. In a building where she did not know who to trust, he was the one partner she could rely on absolutely. He seemed to sense the tension in her, staying closer than usual, His alertness heightened even during quiet moments. The pieces began to come together. Marcus Webb's financial records showed a pattern of deposits that coincided with key dates in the compromised cases. The amounts were not large, a few $100s here, 1,000 there, but they were consistent. Someone was paying him, and the payments lined up perfectly with evidence going missing or getting contaminated. David Chen was harder to pin down. His finances were clean, his behavior unremarkable. But Sarah noticed something else. His cases had an unusually high rate of dismissals and acquittals. Not because of poor police work, but because of evidence problems. Time after time, key exhibits would disappear or get compromised, and cases that should have been slam dunks fell apart. The connection between Webb and Chen became clear when Sarah dug into their personal histories. They had been partners early in their careers, working together in narcotics for 3 years before moving to different divisions. That relationship had never been documented in the IA file. Either it had been missed, or someone had deliberately omitted it. Sarah took her findings to Captain Rodriguez in a private meeting, the door closed and the blinds drawn. "Webb is the bagman," she said, spreading her notes across his desk. "He handles the physical evidence, makes the deposits, takes the payments. Chen is the strategist. He identifies the cases, coordinates the timing, probably handles the outside contacts. They've been running this for at least 2 years, maybe longer." Rodriguez studied the evidence, his face grim. "What about Huang?" Sarah shook her head. "I don't think he's involved. He's been noticing things, getting suspicious. If anything, he might be a liability to them. Someone who asks too many questions. That might put him in danger. It might put all of us in danger," Sarah said. "I got a warning text last week. Anonymous number, untraceable. They know I'm looking." Rodriguez was silent for a long moment. Then he reached for his phone. "I'm going to bring in IA officially. This has gone beyond what you can handle alone. With respect, sir, I'd rather stay on it. If IA comes in with badges and questions, Webb and Chen will lawyer up and destroy whatever evidence they haven't already hidden. Let me keep digging. Let me build an airtight case." Rodriguez hesitated. "That's a risk, Collins. These are dangerous people." Sarah met his eyes. "I know, but it's also the only way to make sure they actually face justice. A premature bust might get us a few charges, but the network behind them, whoever's paying for this, they'll walk away clean." Rodriguez considered this. Finally, he nodded. "1 more week. But I want daily reports, and I want you to be careful. If things go south, you call for backup immediately. Understood?" "Understood." Sarah gathered her notes and stood to leave. At the door, she paused and looked back. "Sir? Why do you trust me?" Rodriguez's expression softened slightly. "Because your dog trusts you. And in my experience, dogs are better judges of character than any human I've ever met." Sarah allowed herself a small smile. Then she left, Max padding beside her, ready for whatever came next. The break in the case came from an unexpected direction. Thomas Huang called her on a Friday evening, his voice tight with barely suppressed urgency. He had found something, a discrepancy in the access logs that he could not explain. Someone had entered the evidence locker 3 nights ago using his credentials at 2 in the morning, when he had been home asleep. Sarah met him at a diner 2 miles from the station, a place where cops rarely went, where they could talk without being overheard. Max waited in the car, windows cracked, watching the door with patient vigilance. "I ran the logs 3 times, Huang said, sliding a printout across the table. "My badge, my code, 2:17 a.m. last Tuesday. But I was home. I have doorbell camera footage that proves it." Sarah studied the printout. "Someone cloned your credentials," Huang nodded, his face pale. "I changed my codes yesterday. Made up some excuse about security protocol. But Lieutenant, whoever did this, they had access to my information. That's not something you can just steal. Someone inside the department gave it to them. Someone with admin access." Sarah felt the pieces clicking into place. Admin access. That narrowed the field considerably. "Do you have any idea who could have done this?" Huang hesitated. "There's something else. He pulled out another paper, a photograph printed from a security camera. This is from the parking garage. Same night, 2:20 a.m. The image was grainy but clear enough to make out a figure walking toward the building's back entrance. The build was distinctive, tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the confident stride of someone who belonged there. Sarah recognized him immediately. David Chen. He wasn't supposed to be in the building that night, Huang said. I checked the duty roster. He was off shift. Sarah stared at the photograph, her mind racing. This was it. Proof that Chen was accessing the evidence locker using stolen credentials. Proof that tied him directly to the sabotage. I need to get this to Rodriguez, she said, reaching for the papers. Wait. Huang's hand came down on the printout, stopping her. There's something else you should know. He lowered his voice even further. I've been watching Chen for the past few days. Being careful, staying in the background. And I think he knows you're on to him. What makes you say that? Huang looked uncomfortable. I overheard him on the phone yesterday. He was in the stairwell, didn't know I was there. He said something about the Collins problem and how it needed to be handled before things got worse. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine, but her voice remained steady. Did he say anything else? Just one thing. Huang met her eyes. He said the delivery was happening Sunday night, that there wouldn't be another chance for months. Whatever they're planning, it's happening in 2 days. Sarah sat back, processing this information. Sunday night, a delivery. That meant drugs, probably. A shipment coming through the evidence locker, hidden among legitimate evidence, ready to be collected and distributed. If she could catch them in the act, she would have everything she needed. But she would also be walking into danger. Chen knew she was investigating him. He was planning to do something about her. If she showed up on Sunday night, she might be walking into a trap. She looked out the window at her car, where Max was visible through the windshield, his silhouette patient and watchful. I need to make some calls, she said. Stay low, Huang, change your routines, vary your schedule. If they realize you're helping me, you could be in danger too. Huang nodded, fear flickering in his eyes but resolve hardening his jaw. I understand. Just catch them, Lieutenant. End this. I will, Sarah promised. I will. Saturday passed in a blur of preparation. Sarah briefed Rodriguez on the new developments, and together they assembled a small team of officers they could trust, men and women with clean records, no connections to Chen or Webb, and the skills needed for a covert operation. The plan was straightforward. Sunday night, Sarah would be in position near the evidence locker with Max, ready to document whoever arrived. The backup team would be staged nearby, close enough to respond within seconds if things went wrong. Rodriguez would coordinate from the command center, monitoring communications and ready to send in reinforcements if needed. But as Sarah went through her preparations, checking her weapon, reviewing the building schematics, running Max through his alert protocols, she could not shake the feeling that something was off. Chen was smart, experienced, well-connected. If he knew she was onto him, would he really proceed with the delivery as planned? Or was this a trap designed to draw her out and eliminate her? She was still wrestling with these thoughts when her phone buzzed. A text from Huang. They moved the timeline. Delivery tonight, 10 p.m. Be careful. Sarah stared at the message, her heart pounding. Tonight, not Sunday. They had changed the plan, probably because they suspected a leak. She had less than 4 hours. She called Rodriguez immediately, explaining the situation in terse, rapid sentences. He cursed, then started making calls, scrambling to reassemble the team on shortened notice. Sarah grabbed her gear and headed for the station, Max beside her, both of them ready for action. The drive through Atlanta felt different than usual. The city's light seemed sharper, more urgent. Traffic moved around her in patterns that felt almost choreographed, as if the whole urban landscape was holding its breath. When she arrived at the station, the building was quiet. Most of the day shift had gone home, and the night crew was skeleton-staffed. Perfect conditions for someone who wanted to move contraband without being noticed. Sarah positioned herself in an unused office on the 3rd floor, just down the hall from the evidence locker. From here, she had a clear view of the corridor while remaining hidden in the shadows. Max lay beside her, his body tense with anticipation, his ears swiveling at every sound. The minutes ticked by. 9:30, 9:45, 9:50. At 9:57, Sarah heard footsteps in the corridor. Soft, measured, deliberate. Someone who knew how to move without attracting attention. A figure appeared at the end of the hall. Even in the dim light, Sarah recognized the silhouette, tall, broad-shouldered, moving with confident purpose. David Chen. He approached the evidence locker door, glancing around to make sure the corridor was empty. Then he swiped a badge, not his own, Sarah noted, but something from his pocket, and entered a code. The door clicked open, and he slipped inside. Sarah waited 30 seconds, then followed. The evidence locker was dark, lit only by the faint glow of emergency exit signs. Sarah moved silently between the shelves, Max at her heel, both of them ghosts in the shadows. She could hear movement ahead, the rustle of bags being moved, the soft clink of items being shifted. She rounded a corner and found Chen standing in front of a shelf, a duffel bag at his feet, his hands full of evidence bags. He was so focused on his task that he did not notice her until she was 10 feet away. "Lieutenant Chen," she said, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "Hands where I can see them." Chen spun, his face a mask of surprise that quickly hardened into something colder. "Collins." He did not raise his hands. "I should have known you'd show up." "Put the bags down," Sarah said. "Step away from the shelf." Chen laughed, a harsh sound without humor. "You think you've got me, don't you? A little evidence, a few photographs, and suddenly you're the hero." He shook his head. "You have no idea what you've stumbled into. Then enlighten me." Chen's eyes flicked to something over Sarah's shoulder. She caught the movement in her peripheral vision. Another figure, emerging from the shadows behind her. Webb. She pivoted, putting her back to a shelf, keeping both men in view. Max growled low in his throat, positioning himself between Sarah and the newcomers, his body coiled and ready. "2 against 1, Chen said. "Not great odds, Collins." Sarah's hand rested on her weapon, but she did not draw. "Not yet. You're both under arrest. Internal Affairs has been watching you for months. There's a team outside this building right now. You've got nowhere to go." A flicker of uncertainty crossed Webb's face, but Chen remained calm. He smiled, and something in that smile made Sarah's blood run cold. "You think this is about a few drugs in the evidence locker?" His voice was soft, almost pitying. "This operation has been running for years. We have people everywhere, in the DA's office, in the courts, in City Hall. Even if you arrest us, others will take our place. The network survives. It always survives." "Maybe," Sarah said, "but you won't be part of it anymore." She keyed her radio, the signal they had agreed upon. "Back up in 30 seconds. Chen's smile faded. He moved fast, faster than Sarah had expected, pulling a weapon from his waistband and leveling it at her. Max launched himself forward before Sarah could react. 70 pounds of muscle and determination hit Chen in the chest, driving him backward into the shelves. His weapon discharged, the shot going wide, shattering a light fixture overhead. Webb lunged for Sarah, but she was ready. She sidestepped, catching his arm and using his momentum against him. He crashed into a shelving unit, evidence bags scattering around him. She followed up with a strike to his knee, and he went down hard, groaning. Behind her, Max had Chen pinned to the ground, his jaws clamped on the man's forearm. Chen was screaming, struggling, but he could not break free. The dog's grip was unshakable, his training holding him in perfect control. Enough force to restrain, not enough to cause permanent damage. The door burst open and Rodriguez's team poured in, flashlights and weapons sweeping the room. In seconds, both Chen and Webb were cuffed and secured. Sarah stood in the center of the chaos, breathing hard, adrenaline still coursing through her veins. She looked down at Max, who had released Chen and was now sitting at her feet, his tail wagging slightly despite the tension of the moment. "Good boy," she said, her voice rough with emotion. "That's a very good boy." Max leaned against her leg, his presence warm and solid and reassuring. Rodriguez appeared beside her, his face a mixture of relief and grim satisfaction. You okay? Sarah nodded. I'm okay. Rodriguez looked at the two men being hauled to their feet. Chen's claims about a larger network were concerning, but for now they had won a significant victory. Nice work, Collins, he said. You too, Max. Max's tail wagged again, as if he understood the compliment. As the scene was secured and the prisoners were led away, Sarah allowed herself a moment to breathe. The investigation was not over. Chen had hinted at something much larger, and those threads would need to be followed. But for tonight, justice had prevailed. She walked out of the evidence locker with Max at her side, stepping into the fluorescent-lit corridor of the Atlanta Police Department. The building that had felt so uncertain, so full of hidden dangers, now felt a little bit safer. It was a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. The weeks following the arrests were a whirlwind of activity. Chen and Webb were processed, charged, and held without bail pending trial. The discovery in the evidence locker led to a comprehensive audit that uncovered more discrepancies, more hidden contraband, more connections to outside criminal elements. Internal Affairs expanded their investigation, pulling in resources from the state level. Sarah found herself at the center of it all, her role in breaking the case making her a reluctant celebrity within the department. She deflected praise whenever possible, redirecting credit to Huang, to Rodriguez, to the team that had backed her up. But she could not deflect the attention Max received. The dog had become something of a mascot for the whole operation, his photograph appearing in department newsletters, and his name mentioned in official commendations. Max, for his part, seemed completely unaffected by his fame. He continued his work with the same quiet professionalism he had always shown, alert and focused during operations, relaxed and playful during downtime. If he understood that he had helped bring down a corruption ring that had operated for years inside the police department, he showed no sign of it. He was simply doing his job, the same job he had always done. Sarah's relationship with Huang had evolved from wary alliance to genuine friendship. The evidence clerk had proven himself brave and resourceful during the investigation, and his attention to detail had been crucial in building the case against Chen and Webb. Rodriguez had recommended him for a commendation, and there was talk of promoting him to a supervisory role in the evidence division. But even as the immediate crisis resolved itself, Sarah could not forget Chen's words in the evidence locker. The network survives. It always survives. They had caught 2 corrupt cops, but the system that had supported them, the shadowy web of connections that Chen had described, was still out there, still operating, still untouched. She raised her concerns with Rodriguez in a quiet meeting. The door closed against curious ears. We won a battle, she said, but the war isn't over. Rodriguez nodded, his expression serious. I know. The FBI has opened a joint investigation based on what we found. They're looking at the bigger picture, the connections to organized crime, the money trails, the political links. He paused. They've asked for your assistance if you're willing. Sarah considered this. Working with the FBI would mean longer hours, higher stakes, more danger. It would mean taking on an enemy that was larger and more powerful than anything she had faced before. She looked down at Max, who was lying at her feet, watching her with those steady, intelligent eyes. I'm willing, she said. We both are. Rodriguez smiled. I had a feeling you'd say that. He slid a folder across his desk. Here's the contact information for the agent in charge. Her name is Patricia Weaver. She's expecting your call. Sarah took the folder, feeling its weight in her hands. It was light, just a few pages of information, but it represented something much heavier. A commitment, a path forward into uncertainty. She stood tucking the folder under her arm. Thank you, sir, for trusting me with this. Rodriguez rose as well, extending his hand. You earned that trust, Collins. You and Max both. They shook hands, and Sarah left the office with Max beside her, walking into the uncertain future that awaited them. The first meeting with Agent Weaver took place in a nondescript office building in Midtown, far from the familiar halls of the Atlanta Police Department. Sarah arrived with Max, as always, his presence a source of comfort in an unfamiliar environment. Weaver was a tall woman in her 50s with gray-streaked hair pulled back in a severe bun and sharp blue eyes that seemed to miss nothing. She studied Sarah across a cluttered desk, her expression unreadable. "Lieutenant Collins," she said, "your reputation precedes you. I hope it's a good reputation." The corner of Weaver's mouth twitched. "Let's say it's an interesting one." She gestured to a chair. "Sit, we have a lot to discuss." Max settled beside Sarah as she sat, his posture relaxed but alert. Weaver's eyes moved to the dog. A flicker of something, approval perhaps, crossing her face. "I've read the reports from your investigation," Weaver said, turning her attention back to Sarah. "Impressive work. Chen and Webb were part of something much larger, as I'm sure you've guessed." She pulled a thick folder from a stack on her desk and opened it. "We've been tracking this network for 3 years. It operates across multiple cities, multiple states. Drugs, money laundering, evidence tampering, witness intimidation. They've got their fingers in everything." Sarah leaned forward, studying the documents Weaver spread across the desk. Names, photographs, organizational charts. It was far more extensive than anything she had imagined. "How deep does it go?" "Deep." Weaver's voice was grim. "We've identified corrupt officers in at least 12 police departments, prosecutors, judges, even a few politicians. They call themselves the Foundation, which would be almost funny if it weren't so depressing." "And Chen and Webb were part of this?" Weaver nodded. "Mid-level operatives. They handled the Atlanta territory, kept evidence flowing, cases collapsing, money moving. But they reported to someone higher up, someone we haven't been able to identify. That's where you need me. That's where we need you." Weaver closed the folder and fixed Sarah with that penetrating gaze. "You've proven you can work this kind of case. You've got instincts, determination, and a partner with a nose for trouble." She glanced at Max again, literally, in his case. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. "What do you need us to do?" Weaver leaned back in her chair. "For now, observe. Listen, Chen and Webb had contacts we don't know about yet. Someone in your department might still be compromised. I want you to keep your eyes open, report anything suspicious. And when we're ready to move on the next phase of the operation, you'll be on the front lines." It was not the aggressive action Sarah might have hoped for, but she understood the strategy. Build the case carefully, gather evidence, and when the time came, strike with overwhelming force. "I can do that," she said. "I know you can." Weaver stood, signaling that the meeting was over. "Welcome to the task force, Lieutenant Collins." She extended her hand. "And welcome to you too, Max." Max's tail wagged once as Sarah shook Weaver's hand, sealing the agreement. The months that followed were a study in patience and vigilance. Sarah returned to her regular duties at the APD, walking the halls with Max, conducting sweeps, responding to calls. But beneath the surface of routine, she was always watching, always listening. She noticed things she had overlooked before. The way certain officers clustered together in the break room, their conversations dying when others approached. The subtle patterns in case assignments, certain detectives consistently drawing cases that later fell apart. The small favors traded, the quiet alliances formed. She reported everything to Weaver, careful to distinguish between observation and speculation. The FBI agent received her reports with cool professionalism, neither encouraging nor dismissing. The investigation was a slow burn, gathering heat over time. Huang proved invaluable. His position in the evidence division gave him access to information that Sarah could not reach, and his meticulous nature meant that nothing escaped his attention. They met regularly at the same diner where they had first talked, exchanging information in low voices while Max waited in the car. "There's a new pattern in the logs," Huang said one evening, sliding a printout across the table. "Someone's been accessing cases that are about to go to trial. High-profile cases. Lots of evidence." He tapped a name on the paper, always the same clerk doing the access. "Martinez." Sarah studied the name. Elena Martinez was a relatively new hire, quiet and unassuming, not someone who would normally attract attention. "You think she's involved?" "I think she's being used," Huang said. Like my credentials were used. Someone's accessing those cases through her login without her knowledge. He frowned. The question is who? Sarah made a mental note to investigate Martinez more closely. Another thread to follow. Another piece of the puzzle. But even as the investigation consumed much of her attention, Sarah did not neglect her primary responsibility, her work with Max. They continued their regular duties, responding to calls, conducting sweeps, training together. The bond between them deepened with each passing day, forged in the crucible of shared danger and mutual trust. One afternoon, after a successful sweep of a warehouse in southeast Atlanta, Sarah sat with Max in the shadow of her patrol car, sharing a bottle of water and watching the city move around them. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, and for a moment, the weight of the investigation lifted from her shoulders. "You know what I appreciate about you, Max," she said, scratching behind his ears. "You never ask questions. You never second guess. You just do your job and trust that I'm doing mine." Max's tail wagged, his dark eyes warm with something that might have been understanding. Sarah smiled. "I wish more people were like that." Her phone buzzed, breaking the moment. A text from Weaver. "We've identified the next target. Meeting tomorrow, 0800. Be ready." Sarah looked at the message, then at Max. The peaceful moment was over, but the work continued. She typed a quick reply. "We'll be there." The next target was a warehouse in the industrial district north of Atlanta, a suspected distribution hub for the Foundation's drug operations. Weaver had gathered enough evidence to justify a raid, and she wanted Sarah and Max on the entry team. The briefing took place in the FBI's Secure Operations Center, a room filled with monitors, maps, and serious-faced agents. Sarah listened as Weaver outlined the plan. A coordinated strike at dawn, multiple entry points, overwhelming force to prevent resistance. "Our intelligence suggests there will be guards inside," Weaver said, pointing to a schematic of the warehouse. "Armed, professional, possibly former military. We're expecting resistance." Sarah studied the schematic, memorizing entry points and sight lines. Beside her, Max sat at attention, sensing the tension in the room even if he could not understand the words. "Collins, your team will enter through the loading dock," Weaver continued. "Max's role is to clear the secondary rooms, offices, storage areas, anywhere someone might be hiding. We need those spaces secured before we can process the evidence." Sarah nodded. "Understood." The briefing continued for another hour, covering contingencies, communication protocols, and extraction plans. By the time it ended, Sarah's mind was buzzing with details, but she felt ready. This was what she had trained for. This was what Max had trained for. They left the operations center as the sun was setting, walking through the parking lot to Sarah's car. The city spread out around them, lights beginning to flicker on as darkness crept in from the east. "Tomorrow's gonna be a big day, buddy," Sarah said, opening the back door for Max to jump in. "Get some rest tonight." Max settled onto his blanket, his eyes already closing. Whatever happened tomorrow, he would be ready. Sarah climbed into the driver's seat and pulled out of the parking lot, merging into the evening traffic. The city flowed around her, oblivious to the operation being planned, unaware of the danger that lurked in its industrial corners. But Sarah knew, and tomorrow she would face it. The raid began at 5:15 in the morning, when the sky was just beginning to lighten and the streets were empty. Sarah moved with her team through the pre-dawn darkness, Max at her side, his body low and silent as they approached the warehouse. The entry was clean. The door gave way under the impact of the battering ram, and the team poured inside. Flashlights cutting through the gloom, voices calling out commands. Sarah released Max with a single word, and the dog surged forward, his nose guiding him through the labyrinth of corridors and rooms. The guards were caught off guard. The first two surrendered immediately, dropping their weapons and hitting the floor. The third tried to run and was intercepted by another team. By the time Sarah reached the main storage area, the building was secured. But Max was not done. He stood at a closed door at the far end of the warehouse, his body rigid with the unmistakable posture of an alert. Sarah approached cautiously, her weapon raised. "Max, what do you have?" The dog did not move. His focus was absolute, his entire being centered on whatever lay beyond that door. Sarah signaled to her team, and they stacked up on either side of the entrance. On her count, they breached. The room beyond was small, windowless, lit by a single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. And against the far wall, handcuffed to a pipe, was a woman Sarah had never seen before. She was in her 40s, thin and pale, with dark circles under her eyes and fear written across her face. She flinched when the team entered, pressing herself against the wall as if trying to disappear. "Don't hurt me," she whispered. "Please." "I didn't do anything." Sarah lowered her weapon, approaching slowly. "It's okay, we're police. We're here to help." She crouched down, keeping her voice gentle. "What's your name?" The woman swallowed hard. "Patricia. Patricia Vance." She looked at Max, who had settled beside Sarah, his alert posture relaxing. "I've been here for 3 days. They said they'd let me go if my husband cooperated." "Your husband?" "David," Patricia said. "David Vance. He's a prosecutor." Sarah felt the pieces clicking into place. David Vance was an assistant district attorney, known for his aggressive pursuit of drug cases. If the Foundation had kidnapped his wife, they were using her as leverage, forcing him to throw cases, compromise evidence, betray his oath. "You're safe now," Sarah said, pulling out her phone to call for medical support. "It's over." Patricia began to cry, relief and exhaustion overwhelming her. Max moved closer, resting his head on her knee in a gesture of comfort. She reached down with trembling hands and stroked his fur. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you." Sarah watched the scene, a knot forming in her throat. This was why she did the job. Not for the excitement, not for the recognition, but for moments like this. Moments when the work actually mattered, when it made a difference in someone's life. The medical team arrived and Patricia was taken for treatment. Sarah stood in the doorway of that small room, looking at the pipe where she had been chained, the bare bulb still swinging slightly from the breeze of movement. One more victim saved. One more thread in the web revealed. The investigation continued. The rescue of Patricia Vance sent shockwaves through the Foundation. David Vance, freed from the threat hanging over his wife, immediately came forward with everything he knew. Names, dates, operations. 3 years of compromised cases laid bare in a series of devastating depositions. Arrests followed quickly. 3 more officers in Atlanta, 2 prosecutors, a judge who had been taking bribes for a decade. Each arrest led to more information, more connections, more threads to pull. The FBI's case file grew thicker by the day, but the leader of the Foundation remained elusive. The person at the top, the one who had built this empire of corruption, was still unknown. Every lead pointed toward shadows. Every witness had only fragments of information. Sarah threw herself into the search with renewed determination. She worked long hours, followed every lead, analyzed every piece of evidence. Max was always at her side, a steady presence in the chaos. It was during one of these late nights, poring over financial records in her apartment, that she found it. A pattern, a name that appeared in multiple transactions, always in the background, always at the edges. Someone who had been invisible because they were so deeply embedded that no one thought to look. Lieutenant Commander Victor Hayes. Hayes was a legend in the Atlanta police. 30 years of service, decorated multiple times, respected by everyone. He had served as Sarah's training officer when she first joined the force. The idea that he could be the head of the Foundation seemed impossible. But the evidence was there. Hidden accounts, offshore transfers, connections to every major figure in the organization. Hayes had been pulling strings for years, building his network while hiding behind a reputation for integrity. Sarah stared at the documents, her mind reeling. She remembered Hayes from her early days, his calm authority, his words of wisdom, his apparent dedication to justice. Had it all been a lie? Max whined softly, sensing her distress. She reached down and stroked his fur, drawing comfort from his presence. I know, buddy, she murmured. It doesn't make sense, but the evidence doesn't lie. She picked up her phone and called Weaver. I found him, she said when the agent answered. I found the leader. There was a long pause. Who? Sarah took a deep breath. Victor Hayes. Another pause, longer this time. Then Weaver's voice heavy with significance. Are you sure? I'm sure. Sarah's voice was steady despite the turmoil inside her. I have the evidence. Bring it in. Tonight. Sarah ended the call and began gathering her documents. The endgame was approaching, and she needed to be ready. The arrest of Victor Hayes took place the following evening, in his home in the affluent suburb of Buckhead. Sarah was there, standing back as the FBI team moved in, watching as the man who had once taught her the principles of good policing was led out in handcuffs. Hayes caught her eye as he was escorted to the waiting car. His expression was not angry or defiant, but something closer to sad. Collins, he said, his voice calm. I always knew you'd be trouble. You never could let anything go. Sarah met his gaze without flinching. You taught me that, sir. Never give up on a case. Hayes smiled, a thin, bitter expression. I suppose I did. He shook his head. For what it's worth, I'm sorry it had to be you. Then he was in the car, and the car was pulling away, and the man Sarah had once admired was gone. She stood in the driveway of his home, the evening breeze cool against her face, and felt the weight of the moment. The foundation was finished. Its leader was in custody. The network that had corrupted so many institutions was finally broken. Max pressed against her leg, and she reached down to scratch behind his ears. We did it, buddy, she said softly. We actually did it. But there was no triumph in her voice, only weariness and a profound sense of loss for what might have been. The months that followed were a time of reconstruction. Trials were held, sentences were handed down, and the full extent of the Foundation's corruption was laid bare for the public to see. The Atlanta Police Department underwent a comprehensive reform, new safeguards were put in place, and a new generation of officers was recruited to fill the gaps left by those who had fallen. Sarah was promoted to captain, a recognition of her role in bringing down the network. She accepted the rank with characteristic humility, deflecting praise, and focusing on the work that remained to be done. Max remained her partner, despite offers to assign him to other handlers. The bond between them was too strong to break, their teamwork too effective to separate. They continued their duties together, patrolling the streets of Atlanta, responding to calls, maintaining the peace. 1 year after the arrest of Victor Hayes, Sarah received an invitation to speak at the police academy's graduation ceremony. She stood at the podium, looking out at the rows of young faces, and thought about everything she had learned. When I joined the force, she began, I thought I knew what justice meant. I thought it was simple. Catch the bad guys, protect the innocent, uphold the law. But over the years, I've learned that justice is more complicated than that. Sometimes the bad guys wear badges. Sometimes the people we trust betray us. Sometimes the system we believe in fails the very people it's supposed to protect. She paused, letting the words sink in. But here's what else I've learned. Justice isn't a destination. It's a journey. It's not something we achieve and then forget about. It's something we have to fight for every single day. And the fight is worth it. Because every time we stand up for what's right, every time we refuse to look the other way, every time we choose integrity over convenience, we make the world a little bit better. She looked down at Max, who sat at the edge of the stage, watching her with those steady, intelligent eyes. I've been lucky enough to have a partner who reminds me of that every day. He doesn't understand the politics or the paperwork or the complicated games that people play. He just knows what's right and wrong, and he acts accordingly. We could all learn something from that. She smiled, looking back at the graduates. So as you go out into the world, remember this. The badge you wear is a privilege, not a right. The trust the public places in you is sacred. And the oath you've taken means something. Not just words, but a commitment to be better, to do better, to never stop fighting for justice. She stepped back from the podium, and the auditorium erupted in applause. Sarah walked off the stage, Max falling into step beside her, and together they left the building. Outside, the sun was setting over Atlanta, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold. The city spread out before them, full of life and movement and the endless complexity of human existence. Sarah took a deep breath, filling her lungs with the evening air. "Ready for the next adventure?" she asked Max. The dog's tail wagged, his eyes bright with anticipation. Sarah smiled. "Me too, buddy, me too." They walked together into the fading light, two partners facing whatever came next, bound by loyalty, trust, and an unshakable commitment to justice. The streets of Atlanta stretched out before them, full of possibilities, full of challenges. The story was not over. It was just beginning. The call came at 3 in the morning, pulling Sarah from a dreamless sleep. She reached for her phone in the darkness, Max already alert beside her bed. His ears pricked at the sudden sound. "Collins," she answered, her voice rough with sleep. "Captain, this is dispatch. We've got a situation at the federal courthouse. Someone broke into the evidence storage facility. Security is requesting K-9 support." Sarah was already out of bed, reaching for her clothes. "We're on our way." The drive downtown was quick at this hour, the streets nearly empty, the city's lights reflecting off the dark surface of the roads. Sarah pushed the speed limit, Max in the back seat, both of them focused on what lay ahead. The federal courthouse was the imposing building of gray stone and tall columns, a monument to the authority of law. Tonight, it was surrounded by police cars and emergency vehicles, their lights painting the facade in alternating red and blue. Sarah parked and approached the perimeter, Max at her heel. A federal marshal met her at the entrance, his face tight with tension. "Captain Collins, thanks for coming." He led her into the building, past security checkpoints that had been hastily reinforced. The break-in occurred about an hour ago. They hit the evidence storage for the Hayes trial. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The Hayes trial was set to begin next week, the culmination of everything they had worked for, the moment when Victor Hayes would finally face justice. What did they take? That's the thing. The marshal's voice was grim. They didn't take anything. They left something behind. He led her down a corridor, through a heavy security door, and into the evidence storage facility. The room was large and climate-controlled, filled with locked cabinets and secure containers. At the center of the room, surrounded by forensic technicians, was a black duffel bag. "Bomb squad already cleared it," the marshal said. "It's not explosive, but they want a K-9 to confirm what's inside before we open it." Sarah understood. If the bag contained drugs or other contraband, they needed to document the alert before breaking the seal. Chain of custody, procedure, protocol, the very foundations that made evidence admissible in court. She crouched down, giving Max the command to search. The dog moved forward, circling the bag, his nose working. After a moment, he sat down beside it and fixed his gaze on her. "Alerting positive," Sarah said. "Whatever's in there, it's something he's trained to detect." The forensic technician approached with gloved hands, carefully unzipping the bag. Inside, nestled among packing material, were several sealed packages of white powder. But that was not what drew Sarah's attention. Lying on top of the packages was a folded piece of paper. The technician extracted it with tweezers and unfolded it, revealing a typed message. "The foundation lives. Hayes is only the beginning. Withdraw the case or face the consequences." Sarah read the message, her jaw tightening. It was a threat, pure and simple. Someone was trying to intimidate the prosecution, to derail the trial before it could begin. But there was something else in the message, something that nagged at her instincts. The phrasing was wrong. Hayes is only the beginning. What did that mean? Hayes was the leader of the foundation. They had spent months proving it, building an airtight case, unless there was something they had missed. She turned to the marshal. "I need access to the security footage, all of it." Of course, he gestured for her to follow. "Whatever you need." The next hours were spent reviewing video, analyzing evidence, and consulting with the prosecution team. The break-in had been professional. Masked figures, precise movements, in and out in under 5 minutes. They had known exactly where to go and how to avoid the main security systems. But they had not been perfect. One camera, positioned at an odd angle in a maintenance corridor, had caught a glimpse of one of the intruders. The image was grainy, but something about the figure's build and movement was familiar. Sarah stared at the frozen frame, her mind racing. She had seen that posture before. That confident, purposeful stride. She pulled up the personnel files, comparing images, looking for a match. And then she found it. Lieutenant Marcus Webb. But that was impossible. Webb was in prison, awaiting trial alongside Hayes. He could not have been in the courthouse last night. Sarah checked the records. Webb had been transferred to a minimum security medical facility 2 days ago, after complaining of chest pains. He was supposed to be under guard at all times. She picked up her phone and called the facility. "This is Captain Collins, Atlanta PD. I need to confirm the status of prisoner Marcus Webb." A long pause, then a voice, hesitant and apologetic. "Captain, there's been an incident. Webb escaped from custody 6 hours ago. We were about to notify—" Sarah ended the call without waiting for the rest. Webb was out. Webb was behind the break-in. Webb was trying to sabotage the trial, but the message said Hayes is only the beginning. That implied someone above Hayes, someone the investigation had not touched. She looked at Max, who was watching her with patient alertness. "We missed something, buddy," she murmured, "and now we have to find it." The hunt for Webb consumed the next several days. Every resource was deployed, every lead pursued, every contact interrogated. The city was on high alert, the media buzzing with speculation about what the escaped prisoner might do next. Sarah worked around the clock, driven by a sense of urgency that bordered on obsession. The trial was approaching, and if Webb succeeded in his mission, whatever that mission was, everything they had worked for could fall apart. Max was her constant companion, his presence a source of strength when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her. They tracked leads together, searched buildings together, pursued shadows together. The dog seemed to understand the importance of what they were doing, his focus sharper than ever. The break came on the 4th day, when a tip came in about suspicious activity at an abandoned factory in southwest Atlanta. Sarah assembled a team and moved immediately, unwilling to wait for additional resources. The factory was a ruin of rusted metal and shattered glass, a skeleton of industry left to decay. Sarah approached with Max at her side. The team spread out behind her, weapons ready. They found Webb in a makeshift office on the upper floor, surrounded by documents and electronic equipment. He looked up as Sarah entered, a thin smile crossing his face. "Collins," he said, "I wondered how long it would take you." "It's over, Webb." Sarah kept her weapon trained on him. "You're coming with us." Webb laughed, a harsh sound. "Is it over? Have you figured it out yet?" He gestured at the documents around him. "Did you really think Hayes was running everything? Did you really think he was smart enough, connected enough, to build something like the Foundation?" Sarah felt her stomach tighten. "What are you talking about?" "Hayes was a front," Webb said. "A public face for an operation that goes much higher. He was useful because people trusted him, respected him. But the real power?" He shook his head. "You haven't even scratched the surface. Then tell me." Webb studied her for a long moment. Then he reached for something on the desk, a folder, thick with papers. "This is everything," he said. "Names, accounts, connections, enough to bring down the whole thing." He held out the folder. "Take it. End this." Sarah hesitated. It could be a trap, but her instincts told her Webb was telling the truth, that whatever game he was playing, he had decided to change sides. She stepped forward and took the folder. "Why?" she asked. Webb's smile faded. "Because I'm tired. Because Hayes was going to leave me to rot while he cut a deal. Because some things matter more than survival." He stood, offering his hands for the cuffs. "Take me in, Collins, and finish what I started." The documents Webb provided were explosive. They revealed a network that extended far beyond Atlanta, reaching into the highest levels of law enforcement, politics, and business across the Southeast. The foundation was just one tentacle of a larger organization, one piece of a puzzle that had been invisible because it was too big to see. The investigation expanded rapidly. Federal agencies coordinated across state lines, arresting suspects, seizing assets, dismantling operations. The trials that followed made national headlines, exposing corruption that had been hidden for decades. Sarah played a key role in the process, her testimony crucial in several major cases. But she remained uncomfortable with the spotlight, preferring to focus on her work rather than the attention it brought. Through it all, Max was at her side. The dog had become something of a symbol, his image appearing in news stories, his role in breaking the case celebrated. Sarah accepted the attention on his behalf with the same grace she declined it for herself. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of testimony, Sarah sat on the steps of the federal courthouse with Max beside her. The sun was setting, the sky ablaze with color, and for a moment she allowed herself to simply breathe. A woman approached, middle-aged, well-dressed, with kind eyes and a tentative smile. "Captain Collins." Sarah looked up. "Yes." "I'm Margaret Hayes," the woman said, "Victor's wife." Sarah tensed, unsure what to expect, but Margaret's expression was not hostile. If anything, it was sad. "I wanted to thank you," Margaret said. "I know that sounds strange given everything, but Victor." She paused, gathering herself. "I didn't know about any of it. I thought I was married to a good man. Finding out the truth was devastating, but it was better than living a lie." Sarah did not know what to say. She nodded, her throat tight. Margaret crouched down, looking at Max. "And thank you," she said softly, reaching out to pet him, "for being brave enough to do what needed to be done." Max's tail wagged gently, his dark eyes warm. Margaret stood. "Good luck. Captain, I hope you find some peace." She walked away, disappearing into the evening crowd. Sarah watched her go, feeling the weight of the moment. Peace. It was a strange concept, after everything. But sitting there, with Max at her side and the day's work behind her, she felt something close to it. Not an ending, but a pause. A moment to rest before the next challenge arose. And it would arise. It always did. But for now, this was enough. The city spread out before her, full of light and shadow, danger and hope. She had chosen to serve it, to protect it, to fight for it. That choice had cost her more than she had ever imagined, but it had also given her more than she had ever expected. Purpose, connection, a partner who understood her without words. She reached down and scratched behind Max's ears, ready to go home. Max's tail wagged and they stood together, walking into the evening. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new cases, new opportunities to make a difference. But tonight, they would rest. The lights of Atlanta glittered around them, a city of millions, each with their own stories, their own struggles, their own hopes. Sarah walked among them, one guardian among many, doing her part to keep the darkness at bay. It was not a perfect life. It was not an easy life. But it was hers, and she would not trade it for anything. She looked down at Max, her partner, her friend, and smiled. "Let's go, buddy." They disappeared into the crowd, two figures bound by trust and purpose, ready for whatever came next.